Want to know what your dog is thinking?
Have a challenging dog behavior you need help with?
The Dish on Dogs is your source for all your canine questions.
Improve your relationship with your dog and deepen your understanding of your furry friend. Right here on the Dish on Dogs. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Dish on Dogs. I'm your host, Mike Gould, affectionately known as the mayor of Houndstown, USA, home to the happiest dogs on earth. You know, the Dish on Dogs, we talk about, obviously, dogs. It's implied in the name, and we talk about all kinds of things, from pet ownership, you name it, we talk about it. This is one of the most rare and unique opportunities that you're ever going to have. So I want you to pay attention. You millennials, you Generation Xers, you're going to listen to a couple of old fart baby boomers today, and we're going to talk to you about how life was almost a half a century ago, particularly in the world of canine. So joining me today is not only a former colleague, but a friend of mine dating back almost 40 years. Bob Schnelle, we're going to talk about his background. I can't even give you the length of it, but he's going to discuss it. So Bob Schnelle is one of the founding members. You'll often hear me described as one of the founding members of the NYPD canine unit. Well, Bob is included in that. And we're going to say hello to Bob, and he's going to walk us down memory lane throughout the history of the canine unit and where he is today. He's one of the few people, like myself, that stayed working with dogs for almost a half a century. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thanks, Mike. Great seeing you.
This is great. This guy's a celebrity. I didn't even realize. He's showing me pictures of himself. I don't know if you guys that don't watch the show, you're going to be... This is him. He's been everywhere. We're going to walk down memory lane, as I said. He's been at Ground Zero. He's been at the Murrow Building, Search and Rescue, you name it, with dogs in law enforcement or service dogs, working dogs. Let's start back in Fort Totten, Queens. What were you doing? You were in the NYPD.
Yep, I was in the NYPD. I had 3 years on the job, which isn't a lot considering I put in for a detail, which I amazingly got. I got put in the April of 85 canine class. So it was 8 of us. It was the first class that was out of Fort Totten, Queens, since the NYPD had broken away from the transit canine training facility and it was training on its own. You were one of my original trainers.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Right.
So, I was young. I was 24 years old with 3 years on the job, and I got my dream job being a canine handler.
Right. So let's go back a little historically, because most people don't realize that the NYPD canine came in existence in the early 80s. Where did you work? You were in the city. Where did you work as a cop?
I came on the job in January of 83. It was a big class. It's when the city started hiring a couple thousand cops and had big academy classes. Didn't really have any connections or any hooks on the job, as they say.
Right.
Got assigned to NSU 1 down in Lower East Side. Spent my training down there, and then I was assigned to the 2-4 precinct, Upper West Side of Manhattan, from 86 to 110th Street, and was on the midnights doing the 9-squad chart back in the day, which most young guys will never heard of,
right,
don't even know what that is.
Right.
Everyone's like steady days or steady tours, and put in for canine just as a whim, thinking I'll never get this detail.
But what was the motivator?
Just always a dog lover. Grew up with dogs, had labs, retrievers. Volunteered at the North Shore Animal League. My sister had worked there also. My brother-in-law is now a vet, still currently working as a vet. Just my love of animals. I said, if I can't be a mounted cop, I want to be a canine cop.
Great.
I would have taken either one.
Right. So people ask me that question, and I always respond, it wasn't so much my love of the dogs or animals, it was disdain for the humans in my life. You know, as you know, in the city, first of all, when you talk about the early 80s, crime was really...
Yeah.
Today, crime right now would make it look like the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. Back in the day, the late 70s and early 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of the reasons that they wanted to introduce canine, to reduce crime in the parks. I mean, you couldn't walk through Central Park. You couldn't walk through Flushing Meadow Park at night without getting mugged or robbed. So that was one of the important influences. And I like you. I like to be I like to be by myself and then dictate my decisions rather than working with a partner. And at that time, in the early 80s, they didn't let you have a regular partner. They were changing your shifts, your sectors, because of all kinds of different things. All right, so you get in. as you're correct. So when I went in, we were being still trained by the Philadelphia Police Department with the Transit Department. And then New York City wanted to kind of take on its own thing. And that's, so you jumped in '85. You're a class of how many people?
There was 8 of us.
8 of us. So what was that experience? So you went to Fort Totten.
Yep. Matter of fact, me and one other handler, we were the 2 youngest in the class. We both came on in the '83 class. Everybody else had a lot more time on the job. Some people had 15 to 18 years. Some people had. So us coming in with 3 years, we were the rookies of the rookie class.
Right. And you had to be an exceptionally good street cop because that was one of the criteria to come into Canine. We weren't taking rookies. We needed people that had good street sense on their own. And it usually was a minimum of 5 years of not sitting behind the desk, but out there, as we would say, making collars, really shaking trees and stuff. So the fact that you got in at such an early age with such little time, that means you were really out there doing things.
I was doing midnights in the 2-4 precinct, and the midnight platoon lieutenant was Lieutenant Nick Estavillo, who wound up retiring as chief of patrol, I believe. And he took me under his wing, and he partnered me up with some guy that had a lot of time on the job, who's a veteran on the midnights. And we were out there every night making arrests. And so I learned the job quick. I made a lot of arrests every night, and padded my resume when I put in for Canine. They said, "Hey, you've been an active cop."
And you're right. So when the founding members, you, me, and all these other, early on, I mean, we were very carefully vetted because they didn't want. They wanted people that was sound, stable, just like the dogs. They needed to be mature, sound, stable, neutral temperament, because it was in the highlight, right? It was in public focus because it was a new unit, and we were deployed in parks for crime deterrence. We would drive around in marked units with our German Shepherds in the back, and our job was to search for kids, apprehend felons, and we had a wide array of different responsibilities. And because it was a pilot program, it was scrutinized by the public, by the police department. So we were under the microscope in that regard. At least that's the way I felt. So after you train, we're going to have to move. Your background is so vast that we're going to have to move a little fast forward. You go to NYPD. You're a young cop, ready to hit the streets. One interesting fact about the Canine academies in general, they're almost as long, if not longer, than the human academy. How long is it? Like 4 or 5 months?
I think back then, we did 14 weeks because we started April, May. Yeah, I think it was 12 to 14 weeks.
Right. So 4 months of training. The academy is 6 months. So this is not just here's a dog, go out, see what happens. The training, it's 8 hours a day, sometimes 10 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week for 4 months. And it involves so many different things. And so you're taught how to track for missing children, search for hidden felons, and so criminal apprehension, searching for evidence. So you're really a technician. It's not just somebody walking around with a dog. You're a highly trained technician. So let's take it from there. You hit the streets. Where did they send you?
So I graduated June, and I went to Central Park, and I was assigned to Central Park, which is one of the pilot original programs for the dogs.
It was the pilot program.
I actually replaced Phil Brown, who was one of the trainers and medical officer for Canine.
Yep.
And he had moved. Then he moved on to the bomb squad. So I was his replacement, and I went to Central Park. I kind of knew the park because I worked in Manhattan already. I worked the Upper West Side. So I was like, I'm in Central Park. This is going to be boring. And actually, it wasn't that boring. I think I had the first apprehension of anybody in the unit.
Right.
And everyone's like, you'll probably be the last guy to get an apprehension. I got the first one.
Right. So just a little, again, history on Central Park. At the time, late 70s, early 80s, crime was rampant. You couldn't walk at night through Central Park. So like all good politicians, they decided to close the park at night. They didn't let anybody in, so therefore crime went down dramatically. And that was their answer to you're reducing crime, just don't allow people in. But then they opened it up. We had Canine. You patrolled in a marked unit. Mm-hmm. So what were the type of activities? Obviously, I'm sure there was some missing people or whatever.
Yeah,
but what were the whole...
Back in 85, the park was having a lot of crime issues. There was a lot of robberies and a nighttime muggings through the park. Tavern on the Green was still popular, still open. So you had a lot of influential people coming into the park to go to dinner, and then, some people wander into the park and there would be a chain snatching or robbery. So it was actually busier than I really thought it was going to be. And the park was having, there were rapes happening in the park. I was assigned to the rape task force for a while because of the rapes around the
Central Park jogger.
Yeah, the jogger. Yeah, so there's a lot of things going on. The park was becoming, and because it's Central Park and it's Manhattan, it was getting a lot of publicity.
Right, it's the epicenter of the world. Right, you hear of Central Park, people come from all over the world to come to Central Park, and you literally took your life, in many instances, you took your life in the hands after dark going through the park. It's a big park. So you took what you learned in canine, and a dog is a tool, an exceptional tool in scent detection. They can run 30 miles an hour. They can jump over 6-foot fences. They can do all these incredible things. But the dog is only as good as the handler. The handler is really the technician that operates the dog and understands and reads the dog. So you must have done a tremendous job there, because your next assignment, what happened after that?
Well, I had an awesome first dog, as you might remember, Tim. He was a German import from Germany. He was fast. The dog was like a rocket. He'd be considered a Belgian Malinois when there weren't Belgian Malinois. He was a shepherd. He could talk to people that he took down, trainers and felons, pretty quickly. And I was a young guy, so I was in good shape. I could run too. Then they asked for a volunteer to go up to Washington Heights for Operation Clean Heights in the 34th Precinct, because that precinct was out of control with the drug trade. And I went up there on a 30-day volunteer transfer, which turned out to be like 6 months.
With your dog, Tim.
With my dog.
Say that as part of the canine. I'm assuming to apprehend drug dealers.
Because crime was, they were having a lot of issues up in the 34th Precinct in Washington Heights. So I volunteered, thinking I'd be there a short time. I wound up being there a long time. Inspector Adamone was the CO, who became the Chief Adamone, Chief of Department.
Louis Adamone.
He loved the dogs. He loved canine. I spent time up there. And then that opened up. I asked to transfer out to to Queens, and I went to the 103 Precinct.
With your dog?
Yeah.
Was that, when you worked up in the Bronx, was that like in plain clothes or in uniform?
No, in uniform with the dog. But I was working with narcotics, and they were doing a lot of... hitting a lot of buildings up there with the issue.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest things dogs do, as I said, they run 30 miles an hour. They have an incredible jaw pressure, 250 pounds a square inch, whatever. It's a lot. And we were able to direct them. So I worked in some plain clothes because drug dealers would know that they could run from the police without consequence, because there was no consequence. Obviously, you can't use any other level of force for somebody, a drug dealer that jumps over a fence and runs into the darkness. So that's when the canine unit really got its most, thanks to you, doing these kind of special assignments where we would go into work with narcotics. They would do drug deals, and then when they went to apprehend them, it wouldn't be uncommon for the drug dealer to run away. You would be on the perimeter, and you could release the dog for felony purposes, and the dog would control. It's a bite, and we call it a bite and hold. So it's not just a random dog attacks somebody and mauls them. We went to great lengths to train the dog to bite and hold a suspect. And as I said, they can run 30 miles an hour. They can do incredible things that there's really no other. If you think of what we have available even today of technology, there's nothing. There's not a robot that can go 30 miles an hour, be voice activated. So you did that extraordinarily well. You did that. So now you're put into the door with narcotics. Louis Adamone, obviously the chief of patrol, I guess, or whatever he was.
Yeah, he wound up retiring as chief of department. Then he went on to run the MTA police department.
Right. So at the time, dogs were kind of new to everybody in the department. So it's kind of phenomenal, right? Horses have been around forever, and helicopters, all these things. So the really proactive cops, proactive bosses, we call them bosses, they liked it because they saw the value in a person like you deploying your dog, and it had a tremendous effect on crime. Crime dropped dramatically. I'm not going to say it was only because of dogs, but dogs provided a psychological deterrent that nothing else could do, because criminals know how to play the system. So I could go up on the roof of a housing project where they were doing whatever they were doing, drugs, dealing, and you could hold 15 or 20 people with one dog because they didn't want to run because they didn't know if they were going to be the one that was at the
No, they definitely respected the dogs and its capabilities, not only on the street but in the subways. The subways crime drastically got reduced with canine. The mere presence of a police officer with a dog was a deterrent.
Right. And that's really its main value. It can do all these other things, but as you said, just because bad guys, criminals know what cops can and can't do. They know. But they're not sure of a 70-pound German Shepherd that's growling and barking. So, and very rarely, by the way, just like the use of firearms, very rarely do you have to actually deploy them because of that.
It's definitely a psychological deterrent.
Psychological deterrent. All right, so now you finish up there. The next step in your career is the bomb squad?
Well, just to go back, because
go back.
We missed a big part.
Okay.
So I kind of, I was always into the patrol aspect of the dogs, and that's what we did. And then, unfortunately, in 1993, we had the first World Trade Center bombing, and we did not have the capabilities for search and rescue at that point or cadaver dogs.
And you're saying 1993? A lot of
first World Trade Center.
Right. A lot of people don't know that there was a bombing at the World Trade Center. In the
that was the first terrorist attack on the United States in 93. So I was deployed to Ground Zero. I was the first canine guy down there in 93. Seems to be my, I don't know if it's claim to fame or misfortune that I'm always the first one there. And,
that's your career, your chosen career, which is great.
I was actually in EMT school down in Flushing Meadow Park, and they pulled me out and said, had my dog in the car, get down to the World Trade Center has been bombed, and everyone's like, what the hell? So we all deployed, me and a bunch of ESU cops, and they asked if my dog was trained to search rubble, and I said he can apprehend perpetrators in a building, but I'll try it,
Of course.
Sense scent, and odor's odor, but I've never done this before, and they started using me, and then Ray Kelly was the police commissioner back then, and he wound up becoming the police commissioner again, and he came over to me one day and he goes, officer, why don't we have search and rescue dogs? And I'm not just a cop. Why don't you ask the bosses? And he goes, when this is over, we're going to have a conversation. And we did, and he said, you're going to go to Connecticut State Police, train with them on cadaver and search and rescue. And that's how that took off, because Connecticut State Police at the time were the only ones that had cadaver dogs and bloodhounds, and they had everything. They were ahead of the game in canine. So I went and trained with them, did the cadaver work. I got involved in search and rescue with FEMA. And then fast forward 95, we had Oklahoma City, we had hurricanes, we were deployed numerous times, and I was the first certified NYPD search and rescue dog in the country.
So let's go back. You're right. Let's go back. So pre-1993, we didn't have search and rescue dogs. We didn't really have bomb dogs. If we had them, there were 3 or 4 or 5.
Yeah, the bomb squad had 6. I think.
Bomb squad had 6 dogs, but in a city of 20 million people, 6 dogs isn't that much. So they were around, but they weren't really utilized until all of these terrorist events. You talk about the first one. We're talking about the World Trade Center. He's talking about Ground Zero. We're talking about the first World Trade Center bombing. Then you talked about the Murrow building in Oklahoma. 95. Yep. Columbine. All of these events that were happening. And that's when I believe that, of course, all of the need for search and rescue, bomb dogs and so forth, which I got involved with privately. And so now there you are. You were at the right place at the right time. And you were a dynamic, as far as I'm concerned, a hard-driving cop that was passionate. Obviously, you're here 40 years later, you're still doing the same thing, which we're going to get to. I don't know if we're going to get to it in this episode, but we're going to follow through, because this is fascinating to me. And again, I just want to show all, I hope I didn't rip your cover.
No.
He's got this is really incredible, and it's actually more than, Bobby and I, we've known each other for 40-some-odd years, and we've been in contact with one another. One of the things I do, over the years, I testify as an expert witness in scent detection things, and Bobby has been very helpful to me. I'll ask a question about cadaver dogs, a search and rescue, their abilities, what their capabilities are, and what they can't do. So he's been a tremendous. So we've stayed in contact like that for over the 40 years now, or close to 40 years. But we still have a few minutes. Let's go from there. You met Ray Kelly on the pile, Ground Zero.
Yeah, and so. Fast forward, he says, we're the biggest police department in the world, and we need to have this capability. So I said, absolutely, sir. I totally agree. And I thought would get a shield back then, but it didn't happen.
Right.
And, I took it and ran with it, and it became my passion because, I love dogs and I love helping people. You can apprehend all the bad guys you want. You'll probably go to court a lot. You probably get sued a lot.
Right.
You find a missing kid, you find a body, recover a loved one from someone, you get closure, you get satisfaction, you'll be in all the books and magazines. Anything I've ever been in has nothing to do with patrol work.
Right.
They're just based on my search and rescue career and my cadaver career. So, as much as I did apprehend quite a few bad guys in my day,
Right.
my last 2 dogs were mainly focused on the search and rescue
Right.
and the cadaver aspect.
But Bob, that's an interesting comment. Because modern day law enforcement today, 2022, we're getting away from, truthfully, using dogs for criminal apprehension. And the real, we're going to talk about in the next episode, the real benefit or phenomena of a dog is the use of their nose. So it's not their teeth, it's their nose.
Absolutely.
And how they navigate through the world. So you recognize that early on, and I give you a lot of credit. And for those listening, this is an emotional business. Like I said, catching a criminal isn't as emotional as recovering a body of a loved one or something. And so I give you a lot of credit because some people just they can't do that. It's emotional and it affects all of us on some level. So we're going to pick up in the next episode. Then you got involved with FEMA, right? What is the Federal Emergency Management?
Well, New York City decided that the government, FEMA, said we need to have task forces that we can deploy around the country in case of disasters, whether it's a man-made disaster or a natural disaster, whether it's an earthquake, a hurricane, or someone blows up a building, unfortunately. So we were the New York Task Force 1. It was made up of 60 members back then. Half of them were FDNY rescue firefighters. The other were emergency service police officers, highly trained. 4 paramedics, 2 doctors, and 4 canine handlers. And we would deploy around the country on a military plane, a C-130 or a C-5 out of JFK Airport. And wherever they sent us, within 24 hours, we had to be.
Yeah, this is amazing. So not only were you the founder of the NYPD Canine Unit, this is phenomenal to me, and what's most interesting for the listeners...
Well, not the founder.
Well, the founder...
of this FEMA.
Not the founder of FEMA, but you were one of the founding members of the national team that deployed. Because before that, there was no really regulated... Everybody was doing their own kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah.
Police
They would just say, hey, you guys go here, but there was no organized search and rescue, and the government funded it.
So you were at the forefront. Maybe you weren't the founder, but you were at the forefront of a lot of these things, which interestingly to me, never really existed before these years that you're talking about.
Right.
So it's kind of amazing. We're going to wrap this up. And then we're going to, I'd like to do another episode if you stay with me, and we're going to do all of these things. I want to talk about the cadaver dogs, the bomb dog, all of this amazing. You have had probably one of the most fascinating careers with dogs that I've ever heard. I thought I was interesting. You've got this covered. Literally on look at where's the cover of this book. That's his dog. Hero Dogs. This is awesome. All right, listen, another exciting episode. Dish on Dogs. Join us next time. This is to all the old farts out there. Tom Sullivan, Todd Mayer, Mike O'Keefe, all you guys sitting around drinking coffee or beer. Tune in next time for the Dish on Dogs.
Thanks for watching another exciting episode of the Dish on Dogs podcast. You can also watch us on YouTube on the Dish on Dogs podcast. If you're a listener, you can catch us on iTunes, Spotify, and all your other podcast platforms. For more information, click the link in the description. We'll see everybody next time.